Welcome to episode 67 of Coffee & Co. Read, your source for all things literary, with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So we're going to get into a quick Would You Rather this week, just to get things going. Today we are talking, would you rather review books professionally or write books professionally? So what do you rather?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think I'd have to pick write books professionally. Even though that would be so hard to actually do. But I don't love reviewing books. Like, I don't use like Goodreads to like write out a big long review or anything. And I find like I change my mind so much about books that I'd be like, you know, the first read, you're like, oh my God, this is the best book ever. And then if you try to read it again, or if you like actually think about it too hard, you change your mind on everything. So I feel like I would just be very wish-washy during reviews. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think write books professionally. Like, I've written some fanfic and shit before, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I think I would enjoy that more. What about you?
Yeah, I sort of feel the same. It's something that I always wanted to do, right? And like, I've made some attempts. Yeah, I've tried to write stuff, and I mean, like, I don't think it's super successful. Like, I haven't published it, but like, I like it. But like, I just wish I had like amazing ideas, and maybe they just haven't come to me yet. Like, you know, it is possible that it could happen down the road. I don't think I would mind reviewing books. I think my biggest issue with being a book reviewer is you sort of don't get to pick. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, if you work for like a company and they're like, hey, you need to review this book. What if it's not my kind of book? And then I'm stuck reading it anyway.
Yeah. And then you kind of have to like, if you're going to be a fair reviewer, even if it's not your type of book, you kind of have to like look at it objectively, and you can't really put your opinions in there if it's like, well, this isn't the type of book I like to read, so I don't like it. You can't you can't say that. Like, that's not fair to the writer if you're just like, bad review because I personally would prefer to read smutty.
Well, that's it, right? So like, you know, I feel like if I'm supposed to be reading like a political thriller, that's not my cup of tea. So, you know, I obviously would struggle to get through it, and then my review would color that. So like, I just, as much as it sounds fun to be a reviewer, I would need to be such a good reviewer that they let me pick my books.
Yeah, really,
right?
though.
I'm such a famous book reviewer that they're like, pick whatever books you want to review, and then I'll be like, okay, and then I'll do it. Yeah.
No, you definitely have to. I think the biggest issue that I find with writing is that it's just so hard to like sit myself down and be like, write. Like, start writing. Just do it. Like, actually getting the words on paper. Like, obviously your first draft of something is probably not where you want it to be anyway. But even just getting a first draft it's so hard to, like, make yourself do it. Because I'd rather be reading a book. Or, like, I have other stuff that is, like, more pressing that I would do. So, like, I think that would be my biggest struggle with actually writing a book. Which, like, I guess if you did it professionally, you'd probably put more time into it.
But at the same time, though, it's, like, I find that I get in the mood to write, or I get inspiration to write, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, I know where I want to go with the story next. And then I want to get down and I want to start writing. If you're a professional writer, I don't think you have that luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? You have deadlines, you know, you have fans that expect things to come out in a timely manner.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, except for George R.R. Martin, I think he does work that way because he's like 20 years in between books.
Yeah.
But like, but I do think that you don't have the luxury of being like, I'm not feeling the inspiration today, so I just won't write. Like, that's your livelihood. That's how you make money. So you sort of have to like force yourself to get over that.
Yeah.
And like it, you know, if you get a writer's block, you gotta like just stumble through the block.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be really challenging.
Definitely. There's obviously hard parts about all of it. I just like, I always come up with things or start thinking about things right as I'm falling asleep. And then I'm like, this would be awesome. I'm going to remember this in the morning. And then I'm just like, next time I remember it, I'm again just falling asleep. So it's not the best timing, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're on the same page again.
We are.
So I guess we'll get into it. We wanted this sort of to be short and sweet because as we have already figured out from last week's episode, that Court of Wings and Ruin is a lot. There's true. A lot to talk about and a lot to discuss. So we're just going to go right for it. So heads up, not a spoiler-free zone, obviously, and things might get saucy.
I can't really remember right now. So yeah, it's our second week, and we're doing chapters 15 to 26. Last week was really action-packed. I always forget how much happens in the beginning of the book, and it's less than a fifth of the book. It's kind of crazy. Feyre kind of fucks up Tamlin's court, and then she fucks all the way off and takes Lucien with her, and they end up traveling for days and are eventually found by 3 of Lucien's brothers, and they're basically pretty much fucked until Asriel and Cass show up to save the day. And then Lucien and Feyre go back to Velaris, and Rhys shows up and kicks everyone out so he can enjoy Feyre to himself.
Bow chicka wow wow.
Really, though. It's kind of intense. Like, everybody get out now, basically.
But I feel like they should have expected that.
Oh, for sure. It's just kind of funny. Like, I feel bad for Lucien. Because, like, so we really just ended. They had sex. And then this chapter starts with Rhys kind of, I guess, tells everyone that they can come back because they need to convene and, like, have conversations. And they go downstairs, and Cass and Az are eating, and Lucien's just, like, in the living room, and he's still in his filthy clothes, and, like, his face and hands are clean, so at least he found a sink somewhere, but, like, he's still just filthy.
Dirty. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I do think is kind of a sin. I feel like Feyre could have helped him out a bit before jumping Rhys's bones, but all good. Before they came downstairs, I guess Feyre's just thinking about it now, but they put rings on each other's fingers, and Feyre joked that she should leave Rhys's ring with the Weaver. Which is so fair, because in the first book.
Yes!
Like,
in Mist and Fury, she had to go get her own wedding ring, so he should also have to go get his. And,
like, we find out something about the Weaver. I can't remember if it's at the end of this week or starting next week or something, but, like, we find out something about who she actually is, and it's like, you sent Feyre to that person's cottage, you crazy son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lucien notices their rings and kind of, like, glares at them, and I'm like, dude, stop showing everything on your face. Like, just fuck off. Like, this is just
But
dumb.
also, like, why is he I don't understand. Like, is he glaring at them because he's jealous because he wants what they have, but Elaine, like, won't even look at him? Or is it more like he's glaring at them because she's been lying this whole time? Like,
yeah.
Or is it just, like, he just hates love? Like, what is it?
Maybe he just hates love.
What is it, Lucien?
I think it's because he's, like, betrayed on behalf of Tamlin, which is just so dumb. But he really does have that chip on his shoulder, which I guess I can see. Like, he's had to live with Tamlin for, like, the last year, and he's been kind of the punching bag and the one that's been fucked over while Feyre was gone. So I get why he, like, feels that way, but I'm also like, dude, stop showing your emotions on your face. You should be smarter than this. Like, you're in their house. Fuck off.
Yeah.
And B, like, Tamlin was a piece of shit. She moved on. She told him she moved on. And she found her mate. Like, yeah. Anyway, not the point. Rhys tells Lucien that he's sure that, like, Cass and Az told him that if he threatens anyone, he's gonna die. But he does say he understands how difficult this has been for him, thinking, like, Elaine was with his enemies. Because obviously, historically, Rhys and Lucien are enemies, I guess. You know.
Yeah.
It's kind of flimsy. Like, well, I guess Lucien and Tamlin didn't really fight in the war, but, like, they would have been on the same side. So it's like, they're using enemies as a pretty strong word, and I'm like, I don't think it should be used that strongly. Anyway, Rhys kind of says that he relates, like, he was in love with Feyre before she cared about him at all, and he would have let her marry Tamlin. And, like, they kind of have a bit of, Rhys and Lucien kind of have a bit of heated back and forth, and Rhys says that Feyre may forgive them one day, but he'll never forget her terror in the study when she was trapped in the house. So when that was in ACOWAR, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously. Sorry, I forgot how ACOWAR ended. But in ACOWAR, like, Feyre pleaded to go with Tamlin and Lucien, and they literally locked her in the house, and she had an absolute panic attack and melted down.
Yeah.
Which is completely fair. Like, but Cass and Az are, like, in the room too, and they kind of walk over and they look furious, and Feyre just kind of thinks, oh, they didn't know about this part, which is like, how did they not know about it? Because she moved into the night court at that point.
Yeah, and Moore went and got her.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, were they just like, oh, she came here for her 1 week and then just didn't leave. That's normal. Like,
but, like, she literally was back from her 1 week for, like, I don't even know if it was a day. And they're like, oh, we're peacing out again. And she was like, what? And that's when she got locked in. Like,
yeah,
she wasn't even home for long enough for it to be a new week.
Yeah, so I don't really understand. And, like, I'm sure,
unless maybe they knew that Moore rescued her. Maybe they knew about, like, her having a panic attack, but maybe they didn't know that she had been locked in or something.
Yeah, that could be it. But I'm like, what did they think happened that made her hate Tamlin and, like, never want to go back? Anyway, so they're mad bros. Rhys is angry and his wings pop out, and, like, Lucien steps back, and Feyre's just kind of thinking, which is kind of funny. I'm like, is this really the time? But she kind of thinks, she thinks of what she would call this if she painted it. It would be the clever fox stares down winged death, which I think is, like, super cool. And, like, all these paintings that she talks about, I would love to actually see them.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, is it the time? I don't know if this is the time.
Oh, they're just having, like, a pissing match. It's fine.
Yeah. It's so silly. Rhys does say that he's only going to say this once, since Lucien's situation is so similar to Rhys's. Like, he should try to understand. And if he doesn't want to understand, like, what happened between Rhys and Feyre and how, like, similar it is to his situation, then he needs to learn to hide it. Which is exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
Because the next time he looks at Feyre with disdain, Rhys is going to rip his fucking throat out.
Woo! Love it.
Which is fair. Like, ugh.
Like, like, he's looking at her with disdain for the fact that she's being unapologetic about living her life and making her choice.
Yeah.
Which is stupid. Like,
it's so foolish. I hate it. Lucien just responds that there's clearly a longer story to be told. And you're like, there isn't, though. Like, you saw how Tamlin treated her. And, like, they even get into it. And, like, later on in my section here, they do actually tell him everything. And I'm like, why does he need to know everything? Clearly, Tamlin they couldn't be in a relationship together because emotionally, neither one of them could deal with their trauma with each other. And Tamlin wasn't helping her in any way be the person she is. So, like, he could see that. He could tell that. And then she left and she found her mate. Like, it doesn't matter what happened. It's her mate. Like, that's beyond, like, just meeting someone and falling for them. That is, like, epic magic level of you're supposed to be together. So, like, I don't know why we need to give him the whole story of what happened between them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like giving him the story is, like, akin to an apology, and I don't think they should have to give him one. You know what I mean? Like, telling him the whole story. Why? But that's what I mean. Like, I feel like them giving him the whole story is, like, sort of their explanation and a way of saying, we're sorry, but this is what happened, so this is why we did what we did. And I don't think they need to give him an I'm sorry. I don't think the apology is needed. I don't think he warrants, like, I don't think he's done anything at this point to warrant hearing the whole story to understand their side. Or, like, being trustworthy enough to have that information. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like he has been on the wrong side of this argument this entire time. Like, I don't think he deserves an explanation.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I can see them giving him, like, the only reason I can see them actually explaining it all to him is so that, like, they can, like, Rhys can show that he empathizes with what Lucien is currently going through. And, like, that is the only thing I can...
I don't see how their situations are all that similar. Like, I do and I don't. Like, so, okay, Elaine is his mate and is not interested in him at all.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, she's also... Okay, maybe I do. As I'm saying it.
They're both engaged to somebody else when their mate realizes that they're mates. And then the person they're engaged to ends up turning out to be a piece of shit.
That's true. I was thinking, like, you know, they've both been through, like, the women, I was like, Elaine's just been through a really big trauma here. Like, how is that similar? Wait a second.
Nothing's the same.
Yeah. Okay, I lied. I do see the similarity. I guess the difference that I'm seeing is the women involved, right? Like, to me, Elaine and Feyre are not similar at all. So, like, I guess that's where my sort of, the similarity of their situations end. Because Feyre actually, like, grows, like, not grows, she already, like, she just, like, has so much more courage, and she accepts the way things are, and then she, like, she makes her own fate, we'll say.
Yeah.
Whereas Elaine, and I know we haven't had an Elaine story, so we don't know what she's thinking, and blah, 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 blah. But to me, Elaine is just, like, she's riding the wave. She's just coasting along for the ride, like, has no desire to accept, like, her life. And I get it. Like, she was taken from the life she wanted and, you know, taken from the guy she quote unquote loved. But, like, I don't know, she's just mopey for way too long for me.
Yeah, but I think, like, at this point in the book, we don't know that. We don't know we don't know that she hates Lucien. She doesn't hate him. She's just kind of indifferent and doesn't. Yeah. But, like, at this point, we don't know how it's going to go. Like, maybe the story is going to turn out exactly like it did with Feyre. And, like, I don't know. Anyway, there's, like, so much to get in with that. And we have no idea where the story's going because we still don't know, which is not at all annoying. So Feyre thinks back to, like, when they were walking here and they were on the road again. Lucien said that he wanted to see Elaine just once so he could decide, like, if she was worth fighting for type thing. So she tells Lucien that she's going to see her sisters and asks if he wants to come. And of course, obviously he does. Asriel, like, rushes off to do some business, and Feyre kind of thinks that, like, she thinks that he just doesn't want to carry Lucien again, so Cassian has to. And they go to the House of Wind, which is, like, more their public home. So her sisters are staying, and she heard from Rhys, like, her sisters haven't asked for anything since they've come there. And they've also, like, not left the house since arriving. So it's been, like, months. Isn't it, like, 2 months or some shit? Like, it's a long time.
Something like that.
Feyre and Lucien have a chat on the balcony, and Lucien's just, like, surprised by all this, like, the city and this house and the view and, like, the Bat Boys and being friends with Feyre and, like, her being High Lady. And this is where Feyre tells him her whole history with Rhys, so he'll understand and know that Elaine was safe. I'm like, if Feyre wasn't freaking out, clearly she knows her sister is safe. Anyway, that should have been enough, but I digress.
Yeah.
Rhys and Cass come and tell their own parts in the story, and, like, I'm like...
Again, why does he need to know anything about Cassian?
I don't think it was anything... Like, I don't think Cassian said anything about himself. It was more stuff about just, like, Feyre and Rhys, but...
I don't care. I'm mad about it.
Like, it took us 5 weeks in a full book to hear this story. Like, how long is this conversation they're having? Like, it has to be hours long. I'm like, they're just standing out on the balcony about to go see her sisters, but they're gonna have this, like, it just seemed, and there's very little mentioned about it. Like, she's just like, and I told him everything. And you're like, I don't understand how you told him all of that. Like, that would have taken a while. Anyway, it just, I guess he needs to know so that in the future, like, he's over this bullshit that he's being a bit of a dick. So, Lucien is kind of shocked that Rhys is more than he played, and he realizes, like, Feyre and Rhys actually do love each other. Anyway, Lucien also kind of mentions, like, he met Amren, we talked about it last week, and she was told to him as a bedtime story to scare children. And Feyre kind of gets into, like, how they don't really enforce rank, and it kind of shows how different Rhys's court is to Tamlin's court. And Lucien says he didn't realize that he was a villain in Feyre's story.
Oh, just came to try and take you back, even though you said no. Well, what? That's not villainous
right.
At all?
Like,
I'm so
also
confused.
Had her sisters changed against their will, like,
by someone who wants to wage war on an entire continent
and kill or enslave all humans. It's like,
yeah. No, he's not the villain. Come on.
I get, like, man, perspective, I guess. He's getting perspective. Anyway, Feyre does tell him that Elaine only knows that he's a High Lord's son who lives in Springcourt, and that he helped Feyre under the mountain. So, like, that's probably good. We don't need to give Elaine any more information to hate Lucien. But apparently Elaine didn't even ask about Lucien. Like, she doesn't care.
It blows my mind a little bit how one-sided the mate bond seems to be. Like, this is my one issue with it, is I wish that, I wish that the women felt like not even, it doesn't even have to be the same level.
Anything at all.
Yes, anything at all.
Yeah. I don't really understand, and I know, like, we'll probably get more about it when we get the book. But I'm like, why is she so indifferent? And not even indifferent, she, like, actively dislikes him. Indifferent would probably be nicer. Anyway, Feyre does say that she wants to see her sisters first, though, and she, like, goes to the library to see Nesta. And Nesta's basically, like, reading, and she's relaxed, and then she sees Feyre and Cassian, and she's, like, super tense. And Feyre's kind of like, there's something happening between these two. Like, what is going on? And there's a lot of that in this, like, in this book. There's a lot of, like, tension between Nesta and Cassian. Okay. Feyre is shocked by how beautiful her sister looks as Faye, and Nesta just, like, isn't even surprised to see Feyre, and she just asks why Cassian is there, and she's, like, very abrupt, and it's kind of a dick move. Like, she doesn't care that Feyre is there. She doesn't care what Feyre's done. She doesn't care about anything. And Feyre kind of just says, at least immortality hasn't changed some things. And
in other words, you're still a bitch.
I'm like, it's just, and I know we get her story later, but, like, I don't like it. Cassian makes fun of her romance book and tells Feyre she didn't miss much, like, while she was off destroying their enemies. And Nesta is just kind of surprised that Feyre was able to do anything. And I'm like, she's done everything forever. How are you surprised that she's done something? Like, I don't know. It was just... Feyre kind of thinks of, like, the power she could see in Nesta in Hybern when she became Fae, and how, like, neither sister is showing any power now. Which is just interesting. It's kind of like a through line. Like, when they were changed, Nesta came out, and, like, you could tell she had something extra, but nobody talks about it really, and she hasn't brought it up, and, like, we don't know what it is, so it's just interesting. But Nesta's basically pissed because Elaine is depressed. Feyre tells her that Elaine's mate is there, and it's a dumb thing to say. Like, Nesta forbids him from seeing Elaine, and Cassian kind of just, like, cuts her thread off, because she like threatens people a lot. But she doesn't, like, she hasn't trained, and she doesn't know how to use her magic, so, like, what are you gonna do? And that's exactly what Cassian says.
Man, if I got magic powers, I would be, like, itching to use them. I'd be like, let me at him.
Exactly.
I'd be all over it. And if I got this, like, awesome, like, strong body that, like, could heal, like, again, I'd be like, what? You want me to train? Like, come on, I'll 1-2 punch.
A hot guy wants to train me?
Yes!
A hot single guy wants to train me?
Yeah. 100%. I'd be all over it.
But same. But Feyre does promise, like, she'll give Elaine a choice of if she wants to see Lucien or not. Like, the whole threat was kind of useless. Feyre can tell, and this is another one of those moments where you're like, how can Feyre tell so much? I guess she's observant, but I also think it's, like, an author thing. But Feyre can tell that Cassian has a longing in his eyes for Nesta. Anyway, that'll never go anywhere. So they go to see Elaine, and Feyre is just kind of shocked because she looks like a shell of herself. She can tell, like, she's not eating. She's just wasting away in a chair, basically. And Feyre thinks, like, she still looks beautiful, but, like, she needs to eat. So Feyre tries to talk to her, but Elaine just says, like, she wants to go home, and she was supposed to be married next week. And Feyre says she's sorry, but, like, nothing helps. And Elaine's even like, people keep saying that to me, which, like, I get. What else are you supposed to say, though? Like, she's just very depressed and in a chair, which, like, is how some people deal with it, so I get it. Feyre kind of turns, and she sees Lucien is in the doorway, and, like, she told him that she didn't want him to come, but he's there anyway. We didn't give Elaine a choice. And this is also a fucking through line in the entire book of not giving Elaine any choice or chance to be a real person. But, like, Lucien kind of realizes that him seeing her won't be helpful right now. So they all leave, and Feyre and Rhys show Lucien to a suite of rooms, and they basically, like, have the conversation with him, like, he's not a prisoner, but he's not allowed on Nesta and Elaine's floor or to talk to them, and he can leave the house, but you can't winnow in and out of this house. So there's, like, is it 10,000 stairs you have to walk up and down? Like, I guess Lucien has continued training and, like, is in good shape, so maybe it's not as hard for him as it is for a later character in this series to do that. But I'm like, I don't think that I don't know if he ever does leave that way, because that's insane.
I feel like going down the stairs would be fine.
I'd get dizzy for sure. But
yeah, but going up the stairs, I think would be. Well,
I would just live in the city then. Like, I guess I could never get back. Too bad.
Or just, like, go back to the other house and find someone to fly you back up.
Exactly. That's what you'd have to do.
Be like, I'd like to go home now.
Yeah.
Please.
Right? So they basically leave Lucien there to, like, actually have a proper bath. And they're like, we'll get you some clothes and that kind of shit. So I'm assuming they get, like, the twins, the twin wraiths, whose names are eluding me. Their names are too hard to say
Nuala and Keir.
Yes. I'm assuming they go get him clothes or something.
I mean, Rhys can also just go snap and he can have clothes.
Yeah. So they all fly to Amren's now, and they are, like, kind of get there to have a little, like, inner circle meeting.
Lucien obviously not invited.
No, he stayed in his room because he is dirty. Amren just immediately off the bat tells Rhys to kill Baron and all of his sons and set up Lucien as High Lord of Autumn because it'll make his life easier. Which is just, like, such a flex.
But so true.
Yeah.
If it worked out that way, it would be so true, because then they could puppeteer Lucien and they would then control Autumn Court and not have to worry about making the alliance.
Exactly. And, like, I think it's even more of a good idea because, like, Autumn Court would be close to Spring, and then they could just take over Spring as well. Like, it's probably the best idea they have.
If they did that, then they would be seen as the bad guys, and then, like, winter, dawn, day, they would all sort of summer hates them anyway, but they would all be like, look how terrible they are.
Yeah. It would prove right that they are terrible people or whatever. Rhys kind of reminds them exactly that, like, they need to win a war. Like, they can't just go killing people. Feyre also, like, asks Cassian about seeing Nesta, and he says, like, he goes often, but Nesta's always bitchy, but he always goes to ask her if she wants to train, and, like, clearly he wants to see her often, which is interesting. Yeah.
And be around her.
Yeah. And she is very prickly.
Is that what we're calling it?
Yes. Rhys then asks Amren about, like, the progress that she's made on the book, and Feyre can hear it whisper, and it calls her a sweet-faced liar, and apparently it speaks often, but Amren just tells it to shut up, which is funny.
I love it.
I do too, yeah. So they kind of have their meeting and like they tell her that like her confirming Hybern's movements and his allies is what they were waiting for. Like it's really good information. So she heard that free Fey lands on the continent are going to ally with Hybern. So they say Valahan, which is one of them, has lots of people, so like armies. Montesair has money, and the other continent, Rask, has both. So they're kind of screwed. Like if Hybern has these three allies, they have no one. So Feyre then asks, what about Miriam and Draken? Who Miriam used to be a human, and she was actually with Jurian for a bit, but then she fell in love with Draken, and then she became maid and Fae, and now they live in a colony that is like Fae and humans living together on a continent of their own, I guess. They kind of have their own section. I don't really know.
They only it's like their own little island, I think.
So I don't really know how the map works out. I could look at it, but I didn't. And yeah, so they tried, while Feyre was gone, they tried to like touch base with them, but their land was abandoned and in ruin. And they think that they may have ran. So apparently in her last battle, Miriam died, and Draken took her to, I guess, this island where a special object that was made by the cauldron was hidden. She was resurrected and made, kind of, I guess, yeah. Anyway, so Hybern can track this item that they used with the cauldron because the cauldron made it. So, which is interesting. Like, why can't he just track... Maybe that's what he does, but like, why can't he just track Elaine and Nesta at all times?
Good point.
Anyway, whatever. So that is what Jurian wants. Jurian wants to, Feyre thinks, kill Miriam himself. Because that is his like sole goal here, is revenge on her for leaving him, and he wants her. And possibly to kill her.
Yeah, I mean, as far as everyone knows, too, like, he hasn't really had a chance to speak.
Yeah.
You know, at all. So, like, I feel like everybody is putting this narrative on him that... of what he wants to do, but, like, I don't think anybody's really asked him.
Yeah. And we do know he is looking for her. But that's all we know from his lips, is that he's looking for her. Because he did ask Feyre about it. But anyway... Rhys kind of says, like, he went to Hybern to see if the people were, like Hybern's people, like, the people that live in Hybern's continent, were for or against war, and they are for war. So they want change and war. They resent the humans for owning land, and, like, Hybern's people see him as a liberator of the High Fae, not as like a conqueror over Prythian through this war. So it's really interesting, like, obviously in war, to have support, you need to have the right narrative, but it is interesting that they really do see Hybern as a liberator against them being oppressed by humans, which is like the narrative that Hybern has created. Like, he's made sure that they haven't had trade routes since the original war, and like his people have suffered because of it, but he's like, he knows that he needs to keep this narrative so that he has support. So he's smart. I'll give him that.
He's very smart. Like, he's not one of those like big dumb rulers like that you usually see, right? Like, normally if you see that they have strength, they're dumb. But he's the opposite. Has strength and strategy.
Yeah, and it's like, I like it. I like when people are smart. So they kind of talk about too how like Prythian's going to be an example of what happens to Fae who uphold the human treaty. So they know that like he's using them as like the example that everybody else is then going to have to fall in line with whatever Hybern wants, or they'll end up like Prythian did, kind of thing. Because they're assuming, like, if he has these 3 territories that are allied with him, there's no way that Prythian can beat him, especially, like, with all the division inside Prythian itself. Like, they have very little chance of winning a war.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of say, like, they can't afford the 3 other continents to align with Hybern. So, like, I guess the Inner Circle, Az, Cass, Rhys, whoever, have been kind of keeping the territories, like those continents, busy by playing them off each other with some lies and some truth. So, like, kind of, I guess, telling them that they need to watch their backs against each other. So they're kind of, like, worrying about their own borders and not helping Hybern. So they're kind of trying to keep them busy enough that they can't ally with Hybern anyway, which is smart.
Yeah. It's very smart.
Yes. And Feyre's obviously pumped about that because she was worried, which makes sense.
But I mean, like, it's not a guarantee either.
Oh, no, of course not. Yeah. So she then asks about the human queens, and Rhys and Az have not been able to get in the palace, and they've heard nothing from the queens. So we don't know what happened to them. We know that they were, like, going to become immortal, and they were all pumped about it, but we haven't seen them since. So they also wonder why the king doesn't just use the cauldron to take out the wall. Like, there must be something wrong with it if he's using the holes in the wall to break this wall, because, like, the cauldron should just be powerful enough to take out the wall without having to find a weakness. But they kind of decide they need to fix the holes in the wall, and if they can fix them, then hopefully Hybern won't be able to take the wall down at all. So Amren says that she is currently, like, trying to find a way to fix the holes. And Feyre asks why they don't just try to nullify the cauldron again. And they're all like, because you almost died last time, you idiot. And they know that, like, she couldn't do it last time. So likely she won't be able to do it again. But also, they've checked, and, like, the King of Hybern is keeping the cauldron very close to him so that they wouldn't even be able to have a chance to get to it again. She asks if she could possibly fix the holes in the wall because she has the power of many. And Amren suggests that Feyre's sisters could help because they were also made. And Feyre, like, immediately shoots it down. And then Amren comments that she sounds like Tamlin when she says that. And Feyre is like, it's basically like a slap in the face to her to hear that. But before Feyre or Rhys can say anything, Mor is furious. And they kind of go back and forth a bit. And Amren, like, tells her they need her sisters to help get allies at the very least. Like, they need her sisters to testify about what happened and say that the Spring Court and Hybern were in the wrong to get the other courts to be on their side. But Mor is not having any of this conversation. She just, like, yells at Amren to tell her to apologize. And before it can really get any further, Feyre admits that Amren was right. It is her sister's choice, and she will ask them. So, like, that's good. Except for
but she could have done it in a more tactful way.
Oh, like 100%. Amren was being a bitch.
And they all do things to protect each other, right? Like, there are instances where they're all protecting each other, and they all make decisions for each other, trying to protect each other. So, like, I agree that she shouldn't have said it in the way that she said it. However, you know, I think they all do that.
Yeah.
So, like, calling her, like, Tamlin is a bit of a dick move.
100%. I do think that, like, this is something that Feyre struggles with the whole book. And, like, she does give Nesta choice, but she does not give Elaine choice. Ever.
Neither of the sisters do.
No.
Nesta and Elaine. Nesta and Feyre. They both try to protect Elaine, like, at all times.
Yeah. And it's just not, like, that really is kind of like what Tamlin did. So it's a lesson she needs to learn, but she doesn't learn it.
Yeah.
She thinks she is right now. She's like, oh, you're right. I do need to give them choice. But then she just forgets all about it. Anyway, Amryn says that they need to get the sisters out of the house. Like, they're stuck in a house and it's not helpful for them. They're not seeing the sun. Like, Elaine is clearly wasting away. It's not good for her. And Rhys then says he's not sure Velaris is ready for Nesta. And Feyre snaps at him and says her sister isn't a feral animal. And Rhys kind of flinches.
I mean...
Yeah.
Like, she can't be nice to anybody except for Elaine, so...
Yeah.
I'd be worried, too.
Yeah, he was a bit of a dick, though. I don't think he needed to say it like that. Like, clearly, Feyre's also feeling very protective of her sisters at this moment. It's just not the time or place for it.
Correct.
And Rhys does apologize. So they all kind of decide, like, they need a united Prythian. So Rhys says they're going to have a meeting with all of the High Lords in 2 weeks, and they're going to send out invitations, knowing that everyone's going to bicker over where to have the meeting. Feyre kind of feels weird about snapping at Rhys, but she, like, doesn't have time to talk about it. She has to go get ready for supper, so they don't have a conversation. Cassian flies her to supper, and they talk about Nesta a bit, and Feyre asks him if he noticed that she, like, kind of like I said earlier, when she came out of the cauldron, you could see that she had power in her eyes or something. Mm-hmm. And he says he's seen nothing of the power since, but he can feel it sometimes, usually when she's mad at him. And he doesn't think Nesta will ever forgive him because he made her a promise in the second book that, like, he would keep her safe. And then obviously there was nothing he could do about it because his wings had been exploded and he was dying. So he couldn't do anything to help her, but he knows, like, she'll never forgive him for that because he did promise her. And Feyre's just like, that, like, that's not his fault. But she does think of, like, the parallel of him crawling bloody to Nesta, and then when at the end of the first book, Rhys was crawling bloody towards her after Amarantha started beating the shit out of her. So it's interesting that she thinks of that parallel, and, you know, we know what it means, but we're not going to get into that. So Feyre asks him why he bothers talking to Nesta, and he just says he can't stay away. So that's interesting.
Yeah, we all know where this is going.
Yeah, right? Trying not to say any spoilers, but anyway, we'll get there. So they go to supper, and everybody basically shows up except for Elaine, and Lucien is all dressed well, and Feyre goes over to talk to him, and she asks him if he wants a tour of the city tomorrow, and he tells her she doesn't need to waste her time trying to convince him. He gets it, like the Spring Court wasn't the home she needed. This is. Which I guess is good. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, but also the way he said it just sort of pisses me off a little bit. Like,
they aren't enough. They
weren't the home she needed. Like, she needed people that, like, loved her and cared about her, and cared about her more than they cared about the formality and the like the pomp and circumstance of being, like, I'm using royalty as a word, like, they're not actually royalty, but they are the ruling
class,
like the ruling house of, you know, the land. So, like, she needed someone to love her and care for her more than their crown.
Yes. Yeah.
And care about her well-being at the time more than her crown.
Yeah. Like, I think he's getting it, but yeah, he does word it in a stupid way.
Yes.
Nesta shows up after that, and she looks phenomenal, and she goes over to Feyre because I guess she doesn't really want to deal with anybody else. But more kind of, like, cuts in and asks Nesta where she got her dress, and she's like clearly trying to like bond with her in a way and talk about clothes, but like Nesta is basically having none of it, and she basically kind of like slut shames more for what she's wearing because her clothing is very revealing for like human standards in this world. So it's a bit like she's really being a bitch. I don't like it.
No.
Then
and honestly, she doesn't do much in this book to warrant like liking her.
Yeah, exactly. Amren tells Nesta she's a piece of work, and Nesta just asks why her eyes glow. And Amren just says that no one's asked her that before, which is just
because everybody's afraid of her.
Yeah, and she's like, because they're respectful of me, unlike you. And you're just like, ooh. But she does tell her it's the one thing that the containment spell couldn't get right. The one glimpse of what's beneath her, like, ooh. Yeah, what does that mean? And Feyre asks, what's beneath? And Amren says that they're the same. They don't fit the mold they were forced into, and then the path changed, and they like kind of both have had to adapt to it. And Nesta tells her she doesn't know what she's talking about. And then Amren says, like, when she erupts, make sure it's felt across worlds, which is interesting. Like, what can Amren see that we can't? There's power of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of start eating, and everybody's just kind of like chatting. It's a normal dinner like they have. And Nesta kind of looks at Feyre and tells her she understands about the food. So I guess last book, Feyre went back to talk to her sisters and asked them to help out. And she was clearly disgusted by the human food that she was eating. And this is kind of almost like a little bit of an apology, but not really from Nesta. It's a bit of an acknowledgement, I guess, which is good. Anyway, the food's apparently delicious.
Makes me hungry.
I know, same. They bring up the High Lord's meeting, and Lucien is obviously curious about it because he didn't know that they had planned this. So they kind of explain it to him that they're planning a meeting in 2 weeks, and he offers some advice. He asks if they're planning to hide Feyre's powers, and he says his father would likely side with Hybern if he thought he might get that kernel of power back from, like, killing her, which is insane. But he thinks, like, his father probably already knows about the powers, though, because his brothers know about the powers, because they obviously attacked her and Lucien. Basically, he just says they need to find out if his father knows that she has the power, and Rhys says that Az and Lucien should have a talk the next day about, I guess, the Autumn Court in general.
Mm-hmm.
Rhys says they also need to visit the Court of Nightmares to ask Mor's father to fight in the war. So Keir, who is Mor's father, is like the steward of
good word,
the Court of Nightmares. Yeah. So like this court kind of has their own governance, and they can technically legally refuse to fight even if the rest of the Night Court is fighting in a war. It was a bargain that like his ancestors made, that like they would stay in the Hewn City and everyone else would have Velaris, but they could then have their own kind of government. They could figure their own shit out and legally refuse. And apparently it's happened twice ever that they've refused to go to war. So they're all going to the Court of Nightmare in 2 days. And Mor says, like, her father's going to say no. And Rhys says he'll find something to bargain with. And Mor is immediately pissed because she knows that, like, whatever they're going to give him is going to be too much. Because, like, for him to agree, it's going to be something insane.
Yeah.
She kind of looks to Azriel, but he says it's not his call. And Feyre wants to ask if there's another way, but she doesn't want to kind of counter Rhys again in a room with people. So
yeah, because like I think too she's especially sensitive to this because in I think it's Mist and Fury, she counters Tamlin in public and he flips out at her afterwards. He's like, you don't do that. You don't question me in public. Like, you can't do that.
It was during the tithe, and then she gave her jewelry to the Wraith. And, like...
Yes.
Yeah, and he wasn't even pissed about her getting rid of the jewelry. He was just pissed that she went against what he was saying in public.
Yeah. So, I think this is why she's so, like, oh, I don't want to go against him. Like, it's an old, I'm not going to say a habit, but, like, it's part of her trauma.
Yeah. And, like, to be fair, this isn't really public, but, like, I'm sure Rhys wouldn't love her to counter him in public either. Like, it's not...
But to me, this isn't public. This is their family.
No, that's what I said. Like, this isn't public. Like, this is their family. So, like, I think it's different anyway. But she's not grasping that difference. But, like, I feel like she could have countered Tamlin in front of Lucien because she obviously did that this book. So, like, I think obviously there's some trauma there, but it's also like they need to figure out their dynamic with people, and they do have a conversation about it, and they do kind of figure it out, and it is kind of what like you would think. Anyway, there's basically a long silence after that because they're thinking about what they're gonna have to give up, and Mor's pissed, and it's just a whole thing. But Feyre tells Cassian that she'll meet him at 8 to train the next morning, and she asks Nesta to join, but she just says no. And then Feyre says she wants to learn to fly. And it's good comedic timing because Mor ends up spitting her wine all over Az. And it's just like a good segue out of the awkwardness of the previous conversation.
Yeah. It was like a funny spit take, like...
Yeah, exactly. Feyre kind of just says, like, she wants to be a part of the war. She wants to fight, and she knows it would be helpful if she could fly. Cassian kind of says he doesn't know if they have time, but Rhys says, like, they'll teach her what they can to give her any advantage. Like, if things start to go to hell, if she can fly, maybe she can get out of there and save herself.
Right.
And actually, Az offers to teach her because he remembers having to learn flying himself kind of as like, I don't think he was like as a young adult, I'll say. Like he was a teenager, I think, when he got out of the basement from his...
I think he was like 10 to 11.
Okay.
Like a medium child. But even still, like... It's a lot different than those that are taught when they're small babies.
Exactly, yeah. So he knows that, like, an adult has different fears than a child who's just, like, running around, learning to fly, learning to walk had. Mm-hmm. Feyre then tells Nesta that the king is trying to tear the wall down with the cauldron, and that Nesta might be able to help patch up the wall. And she also needs to train. And Amren actually offers to train her to use her magic. And Amren kind of decides, like, they'll both go to the Hewn City too to see if Nesta can feel the magic that is in, like, if she can pick out the magic. I don't know if, like, in Keir's trove, if he has anything that belongs to the cauldron or was cauldron made. But I guess to see if she can feel...
Yeah, there's some sort of, like... Yeah, they're just going into this, like, big room of, like, magical antiquities and just playing around with them, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah. So it's an interesting plan. Yeah, so they're gonna go to practice her magic or whatever. And Nesta just asks why they don't just kill the king and, like...
be done with
exactly. Have it done with. Not have to worry about a war. Not have to worry about the wall. And then she also asks what happened to the human queens and if they're immortal. And Az says that they don't know. And Cassian asks why. And she kind of responds that she wants them all dead. And if they promise that like they'll kill the queens, they'll kill Hybern, then she will train. So they do promise to kill them all, which is interesting because they don't do it. At least not yet. Anyway. Yeah. Then, so Nesta agreed to something. So Feyre's like, maybe I'll ask her to testify about what Hybern did to her too at the High Lords meeting. And Nesta just flat out refuses. And she does tell Feyre she has no idea what happened to her. And she's not going to whore her story to them. And she also forbids them all to ask Elaine, or she'll rip their throats out. Which, like, I 100% think that this was the wrong time for Feyre to ask her, like, in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Also, Feyre hasn't given any thought at all to what it actually was like for Nesta to be in the cauldron. Like, she hasn't even, like, thought, oh, maybe it was awful. Maybe, like, what actually happened. Like, she's just like, oh, she turned Fae, that's it. Like, obviously there's more to it that we don't know about.
But I also feel like she's almost pushing her own trauma, not onto Nesta, but, like, one of the big gaps right now between Feyre and Nesta and Elaine is that, yeah, Feyre was made against her choice. Like, it was against her, like, she didn't choose it.
Yeah.
But she was also either dead or high Fae.
Yeah,
so, like,
it's different. It
was way different for her. And, like, she was traumatized, like, doing those 3 trials, but it wasn't the same. Like, she chose to go in there. She chose to do those trials. Were they a lot more awful than she thought they were going to be? 100%. But she was fighting for something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Nesta and Elaine were taken against their will and made into something that they didn't understand, that they hated, removed from the life that they knew, and are now sort of shoved into this life. And Feyre's doesn't understand why they're unhappy.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, you kind of got to think about it from their perspective. They were given something they didn't want. Like, would it be amazing to be, like, immortal and magic? Sure. But would I want to be ripped from my family in order to achieve that? I don't know.
Yeah. And, like, it's not the same, like, it's not even just becoming immortal and magic. It's becoming something that you have been taught to hate and fear your entire life. Like, there's so many layers there. But yeah, she really isn't thinking. And she kind of realizes that in this moment. She's like, fuck, I shouldn't have asked her here, and I should have realized that there was more to all of this than I really know. Anyway, this is like the second time she's talked to Nesta since she's been home, too. I'm like, you could actually just have a conversation with her, maybe, and not just... It's just... Anyway. Mor puts an entire bottle of wine in front of Feyre, and I'm like, fair.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
So after supper, Feyre and Rhys walk through the city, and Rhys asks Rhys asks if Feyre will hate him for calling Nesta difficult, because obviously when he said that she was a feral animal, Feyre kind of freaked out. So he's kind of like, you know, she is difficult. Am I allowed to say that? And then she kind of says, like, she shouldn't have, like, asked Nesta in public, kind of like we just said. And she asks him how he balances being, like, his family. He's still their High Lord. Like, how does he balance both of those things? And he admits it's hard, and he does make mistakes, which is kind of like a teeny tiny bit of foreshadowing, right? Like, yeah, like, yes, this is, you're about to make one. Maybe you should realize it. Anyway, Rhys kind of apologizes again for like saying shitty thing about Nesta earlier, and she apologizes for undermining Rhys's authority in front of everyone. But he says he doesn't care about that part at all. Like, it's their family. And Feyre, they kind of have a conversation about it, like we said. And Feyre says, like, they won't undermine each other in public. If they have questions, they'll use the bond. But, like, he wants her to feel comfortable calling him out and pushing him. And, like, they can do that for each other in front of family and in front of the inner circle. Because, like, that's fine. But they don't want to do it in public, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So Feyre then tells him that he should be careful working with Keir because it might wound more than he wants it to. He says he knows that, but he also says, like, they've been working together for years and more should be over it. And I'm like, you can't say that. You can't just dismiss someone else's trauma because you think it's been a while. Like, not good. So that she, like, kind of drops it then, and she asks how she should act as High Lady at the Hewn City. And he says that it's her choice to, like, find the mask that she's going to wear there and, like, how she's going to act. Mm-hmm. They talk about the High Lord's meeting and bring up Tamlin, but she doubts he's going to show up. And she says, like, if he shows up, we'd kill him or he'd kill us. And Rhys is like, you can't really do that. Whenever we have meetings like this, there's a spell and any violence will come back, like, at a steep price. So, like, if you were to punch somebody, maybe you'd get punched 10 times as hard. It's kind of like, reminds me of the Mark of Cain in City of Bones trilogy. But I don't know if it, like, we actually do have the High Lord's meeting later, and I don't think it actually happens. Like, I don't understand. They say there's this spell. Anyway, we'll get to it when we get to it. So, obviously, if Tamlin does show up, he's not going to be able to kill them, which is good.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And she also brings up Tarquin, who also wants to kill them. He's the High Lord of Summer, and he has the blood rubies out on them. So, like, it's going to be a loaded meeting. Like,
I wish somebody would send me a blood ruby.
That'd be good.
I would sell it, and I would take a nice vacation.
That'd be good. Good plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feyre kind of wonders if they're going to end up with any allies at all. So, like, it's clearly going to be an uphill battle getting all the High Lords to be on the same page, which is kind of crazy. You're like, shouldn't they already be? Anyway, whatever. I don't know. Feyre then also kind of says, like, Rhys must trust Lucien a bit to let him see his wings. But Rhys kind of explains to her, like, they have the one thing that Lucien wants. He doesn't really trust him past that. He just trusts that, like, they kind of not control him, but, like, he's going to be loyal to them while they have a lane. So they kind of decide, like, they're going to wait and watch him and what he does and see if they can actually trust him as a person or what's going on. It's all kind of like a game of, like, seeing where he is. So they're just going to wait and decide later if they actually trust him past that.
Right. Yeah.
Rhys promises that he's going to keep planning for their future. War or not, they deserve to be happy, and he is going to fight for it. And she tells him that he woke her up and he saved her, and she will fight with everything she has too. So they're both fighting to have a future together past this war, which is good. The next morning, Feyre wakes up, and she wakes Rhys up slowly before she leaves to train with Cass. And we don't really get it, but clearly they have sex. She's currently at the training ring with Cass and thinking back. And, like, SJM does this a fair bit, where, like, someone will be somewhere and thinking back on, like, the sex they just had. But she's thinking about him laying her on her stomach and kissing his way down her back and then lifting her up and like lying underneath and feasting on her. So pretty hot.
But like the thing that I find hilarious is that like SJM does it sometimes too, is they'll be thinking about the hot and sweaty moment and then they'll get aroused and then the other people can smell it. We've talked about how much we enjoy that.
Yes. But then, like, clearly she's thinking about it, and that's probably exactly what's happening. But she says to Cass that she has 2 Illyrian males making her sweat in one morning. And I'm like, that is bold to say out loud.
It's also valid.
Oh, like, 100%. But I'm like, you have some relationship with Cass, too. They're like besties talking about their night. Like,
yeah.
But Cassian like points her to the ring and says that they're gonna fight without weapons because she's been gone for so long that they're gonna just do basics. And she kind of gets a feeling off of him that he's like annoyed, and she asks him what's wrong, but he denies anything. And then she kind of like realizes that he's angry. And when they start to actually spar, he tells her. He's pissed that they hid the fact that she was High Lady before they went to Hybern. So, in the last book, Rhys and Feyre go to a temple and basically get married, and she becomes High Lady. And they don't tell anyone, and then the next day they go to Hybern, and she essentially gets kidnapped. So, Cassian is super pissed about this. But she argues like it's no different than being Rhys's mate. And he says, it is. She is his High Lady. That's different than her just being Rhys's mate. She belongs to like all of them as High Lady. And she kind of reasons like that's probably why Rhys didn't tell anybody that. And he says this isn't between him and Rhys. This is between her and him. This is between Feyre and Cassian. Like, this is, like, he says he's already talked to Rhys about it, and they've had words, and probably fought each other, too. But he says she didn't think she was essential, and she kind of says, like, she's not. Az and Cass were hurt, her sisters were in danger, and she couldn't live with anyone else, like, being hurt or anything like that. So
being sacrificed.
Exactly. So she did what she had to do. But he compares it to Rhys going to Amarantha's party 50 years ago, and he says he'll never forget it. Like, Rhys saved them all, sure, but Cass was not okay, and he kind of had the exact same feeling this time when clearly his wings were fucked. So he woke up, I think it was like 2 weeks after the incident in Hybern, when he like was healed a bit, and Mor told him that Feyre was gone and also that she was High Lady. So he tells her that like both her and Rhys need to accept help and not try to do everything alone. And he says Rhys is going to fight Hybern, allies or no, and he's going to give his whole self in the process. And Feyre like kind of realizes that like Rhys would sacrifice himself for them all, and like they both kind of have this trait in themselves, which is terrible for each other.
Like, it is, but at the same time, I also like, I understand where Cassian is coming from, but I also totally get where Feyre is coming from, because she popped into this circle. She was really only there for like a couple of months, right? Before she had to leave again. So like, yeah, obviously her and Rhys are mates, and yeah, she made friendships with the others, but like as to being essential, finding her place, like she hasn't really found a role yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like Cass is the warrior, Az is the spy, Rhys is the leader, you know, Mor is the second in Mor is the like the Hewn City
liaison.
Yeah. And Amryn is the second in command and, like, essentially the one that's going to, like, the most powerful one of them all. Like,
yeah.
I can see why she would think she's non-essential, because what job does she have?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the High Lady, so she's the ruler, but Rhys already does that on his own.
He doesn't need her.
Yeah, like, she isn't needed to do that. So I just, like, I can totally see why she feels non-essential.
But also, how else were they going to get out of that situation without her doing what she did? Like, there's no other way that they would have gotten out of there unscathed. I don't know what they expected anyone else to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then Nesta shows up, and Cass asks if she wants to join, and they, of course, go back and forth, ribbing each other with witty comments, and Nesta basically says she's meeting Amryn there. And Feyre goes down the bond to ask Rhys to save her, but he's in a meeting with the governors, so he can't. Az shows up and tells her they need to start early, and it's really just Rhys told him to go save her from the bickering of Nesta and Cassian. But they go to a nearby lake, so he says it's because it's easier to crash in a lake than it is on the ground. So,
very true.
Yeah.
100% true.
Yeah. So Azriel tells her that she obviously needs wings to fly, and she kind of admits, right? It's so dumb. She admits that she might need time. And, like, she thinks in her head that, like, shifting reminds her of Tamlin, and it kind of hurts a bit. Like, she kind of has two thoughts on it. Like, it reminds her of Tamlin, and she doesn't love that, but she's also, like, happy that she took something from him. So she has complicated feelings towards shifting. And obviously, like, she probably has a bit of PTSD because he's a fucking angry asshole, and he'll shift, like, his hand he can't control when his claws come out, and, like, you know, he also broke in the door of her little cabin and stole her away. Like, she doesn't have great memories of his shifting. Yeah. Other than that one time when he used his claws to shred her underwear, I guess. Anyway. So she thinks of Rhys's wings and, like, starts making her own wings on her back, and Az gives her feedback on how to actually make them functional wings, and Feyre is basically, like, sweating by the time the wings are right. And they are super heavy, and she is already dying of it.
Yeah.
Azriel asks her permission to touch the wings to see if they feel right, because, like, you don't just touch an Illyrian's wings, which we've heard before.
Well, and remember, like, she can touch Rhys's
so
wings,
weird.
and he can just be completed.
Yeah.
Like, he can just
orgasm.
Just
impact.
So, like, I feel like this is a similar thing. He's like, can I touch your wings? And it's like, oh.
Yeah. So weird. Anyway, he tells her that her wings are perfect, basically. And he tells her the first lesson is to not let them drag on the ground. And he says it's seen as lazy, but it also could damage your wings if they're, like, dragging on the ground, obviously. And she, like, that alone is hard as hell. Like, she, like, struggles to get them off the ground, and she, like, has to open them on her back and then close them to keep them up. She can't just pick them up. So he tells her that she needs to strengthen her back and thighs and arms and core. And she's just like, so everything. I need to strengthen everything. He's like, yes. And they kind of have, like, a little, like, playfulness, which is kind of sweet. And I think it's nice to, like, actually develop her relationship with Azriel, because she's kind of developed a relationship with Cassian that is nice and its own friendship and, like, separate from just being their friend's mate kind of thing. So I think it is nice that we're also getting a bit of a relationship with Az here. So he gets her to practice flaring her wings and then tucking them in, lifting them off the ground. And she kind of starts to think, like, flying lessons could be a bit of a waste of time. Because, like, she can't even, like, doing these basic things is hard enough. And she's not even trying to get off the ground at all. She's just like lifting her wings off the ground. She wonders if she'll ever be able to fly.
Aww.
Lucien.
Okay. Yeah, I know that she has these conflicting emotions about the flying, because I know that she's sort of like, she's worried that like they have such limited time to get stuff done. Like, if flying is going to take this long, should they be using their hours for other things, like things that are maybe a bit more strategic? But I mean, you still got to take time for you.
And like, I feel like her getting stronger to use her wings and stuff is helpful, even if she never uses her wings again. Like, getting that physical strength, and this is a workout in itself, is going to help her.
Yeah. So I guess we move on to the next bit. So Feyre and Rhys are descending the stairs beneath the House of Wind. So it's not the 10,000 stairs to get you outside. It's a different set. And it's a library underneath, which is so cool. Like, why can't I live under, like, on top of a library?
I want to.
And Feyre sort of mentions that she's never been to a public library before. Like, she's been to, like, private libraries a whole bunch, but never, like, a public library. I don't think they're super common on the human side. Like, in the human realm.
It doesn't seem like it, which is sad.
Like, yeah. So as they're descending the stairs, they talk a little bit about what life was like for humans before the war. So apparently humans were not allowed in libraries unless they were slaves running errands for their masters. And mostly that was because the Fae didn't want the humans to have any of the knowledge that were housed in libraries. And that includes certain books that had spells that humans could cast without having magic. So they obviously didn't want humans to have any magic so that they couldn't, like, rise up against their oppressors. So when the war started, a lot of libraries were burned by the Fae so that the humans couldn't get their hands on those books.
Which is sad.
That is ridiculous. But I mean, that is something that happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, that still happens, right?
Yeah.
There are book burnings, and it's, like, so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know what to say about it other than it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
They speak a little bit about demi-fae. So that's actually what Miriam was, like, half fae.
Mm-hmm.
So they are usually born from human mothers and fae fathers. Not usually the other way around, but I guess occasionally it could be. Mm-hmm. But most of them apparently went with their human mothers. And they were ostracized from human society because obviously they were reminded, like, the humans seeing these half-fae, it reminded them of their oppressors. So they were ostracized, right?
Yeah.
Then, on the other side of it, those that stayed with the Fae were also ostracized and treated horribly and essentially forced to, like, sell themselves to survive. Like, they couldn't get normal jobs. They couldn't do normal things. They were essentially, I'm not going to say the replacement for humans, but kind of, right? Yeah. Like, they had to take over the jobs that humans had.
Mm-hmm. Which weren't jobs.
Yeah. And Feyre sort of asks, like, have any of them, like, have you offered any of them refuge, like, letting them stay here and be safe? And Rhys said no, because Velaris hasn't allowed any half-fae or humans inside of it for centuries, which is sort of like, dude.
Yeah, that's not a good enough reason.
No. But he also said, like, it's hard to offer refuge in a secret city.
Yeah.
Like, no one can possibly come upon it and be like, I need sanctuary. But
And obviously the outward court is terrible, so no one would go to the night court
for aid, yeah. But Rhys does tell Feyre that if the wall comes down, like, he would open Velaris for anybody that can reach it. But, like, isn't it the farthest away?
Yeah.
So they would literally have to traipse through all of Prythian just to get to Velaris, because the night court is at the top.
Yeah.
From my map remembering skills.
Yeah.
Anyway. So they finally make it into the library, and there are priestesses, sort of like Ianthe-style priestesses, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, and Feyre's sort of like, wow, there's so many priestesses here. And Rhys sort of says, like, this is their temple. Like, they serve knowledge. Like, their temple is knowledge. And I'm like, yes, I'm here for that.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. They are met by Clotho, who is I guess she's a mute priestess. Fun fact, Clotho is the name of one of the 3 fates in Greek mythology.
We love our Greek mythology.
I know I do.
Yeah. That wasn't sarcastic. I was being serious.
Anyway, so yeah, she's a mute priestess. She shows them around. She has, like, their setup already. I guess Rhys called ahead and got her to take some books out for them. So the library has, like, this giant, it's like a giant corkscrew hole in the middle and, like, a ramp that gradually goes down and down and down. And each floor has, like, shelves on it and, like, tables to read at. Like, it's like each floor of the library, but you get there by descending this corkscrew ramp. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously a big hole in the middle. And Feyre asks, like, what's down there? And Rhys is like, I honestly don't know. He said when him and Cassian were kids, I say kids, I think in the book it says younger, so they might not have been kids. They might have been, like, teenagers or young adults.
Yeah.
But Rhys dared Cass to go down there, and apparently he didn't even get all the way to the bottom, but when he came back up, he was, like, so scared. He was pale, and he's shaky, and refused to talk about what he saw. But, like, apparently if you mention this hole to this day, he's still terrified. And, like, made Rhys promise to never go down there. Mm-hmm. So, like, whatever is down there, it is scary.
Yeah.
So Clotho leads them to their table, and it's got, like, full of books, and there's, like, a tea service and snacks. And, like, this sounds like my ideal life.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be led to a table full of books with snacks and tea.
Yeah. Same.
Right? But then, do you know, a part of me is like, what? They're allowed to eat in the library?
I know. I'm like, this must only be because he's the High Lord. Like, no, this is not okay.
Yeah. So Feyre notices that Clotho's hands are all scarred and crooked and, like, deformed. And she thinks about how much effort it must have taken her to set up their table. But Clotho does something with her hands, and, like, turns out she's got, like, levitation magic, so maybe not as much effort as she thinks. Clotho then leaves, and I guess Feyre sort of asks, like, what happened to her? And it's a really sad story, actually. It's, like, it's really depressing. Apparently she was, like, hurt and essentially raped by a group of males. Not even just one, like a whole group. And so afterwards they cut out her tongue and damaged her hands so that she couldn't tell anyone what happened. So Moore found her, because I guess I'm thinking, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm thinking she might have been a priestess anyway. Like,
yeah,
in one of the actual temples.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Moore found her and ended up hunting down the males who did this to her. I don't know how she told them who it was. Oh, I guess Rhys probably, like, looked inside her mind. But,
yeah.
But anyway, so, like, Feyre was like, can't you just heal her hands? But apparently, the males would heal her hands as they broke them and set the bones in place all broken.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the damage was sort of already set when they got to her. And the only way it can be fixed is if they re-break and reset the bones. But apparently, like, Clotho said, in quotation marks, she can't talk. But she apparently couldn't take the mental anguish it would take to do that. So she just lives with the mobility. And maybe in time, maybe she'll want to get back to that, but it's a terrible story.
Yeah.
So Moore brought her to the library and stayed with her for a whole month, helping her heal. And, like, not just physically heal. Yeah. But, like, it had to have been more because, like, this is almost another reason why Moore was so important, because really it was the three men, Moore and Amryn. Can you imagine Amryn being comfort to, like, a female afraid of men?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, so that's another part of Moore's, like, why she's necessary to the group, because sometimes you just need a woman.
Yeah.
Anyway, now Clotho lives and works in the library. She never leaves. And Rhys admits that he built the library for females like her. Like, females that have suffered similar fates to her. Mm-hmm. And he says that they can use the library to heal, and then they're free to either stay and work in the library as long as they want, or once they've healed, they're allowed to leave. So it's a really nice thing, I think, that Rhys has done.
Yeah. For sure.
Especially since, like, coming on the opposite side of it, like, the Court of Nightmares with Keir, like, they really don't care about females at all. So then you've got Rhys coming at it from a completely different angle of, like, he really cares. So they sit down at the table and they get started. I forget what they're supposed to be looking for.
They're trying to figure out how to fix the holes in the wall.
Right. Okay. So they get started, and obviously Rhys and Feyre are gonna start flirting and touching. So he's, like, touching her leg, and then he's obviously bringing his hand higher and higher. All of a sudden, he's putting his fingers, like, on her vagine, and she's getting all turned on and hot and bothered, and then all of a sudden, he's gone. And she's like, what the fuck? Like, where did you go? Like, she's like, I'm all hot and bothered over here.
That's rude.
Right? And he said he winnowed away, and he took half the books with him because she distracts him. Who was distracting who there?
I love it.
So he said, like, we'll work for 2 hours, and then we'll go play.
Fair.
So, anyway, I guess she asks him, like, I guess they share their info. Like, they work for the 2 hours, and they share the things that they've learned. So they get the info that the wall was really only meant to be a temporary situation. Like, it was just supposed to go up temporarily until everything sort of cooled off between the two sides, and, like, the Fae forgot that they wanted to murder all the humans.
Yeah, I don't... They're like, we're going to separate these people, but eventually they'll all get used to living with each other, and we'll take the wall down. Like, that's not how the world works.
Yeah. But, yeah, and you're exactly right. It just became permanent as time went on, because obviously the Fae were content to leave it up, because then the humans are sort of out of sight, out of mind. And the humans' lifespans were so fast that the wall just became a legend, right? And it morphed into something else for them. Feyre asks Rhys if she was like, do you think we have a chance of winning this war? And he said, like, nah, I think our chances are slim.
Ideal. Good.
Yeah, it's like, that's what I want to hear. But he also thinks that maybe if he could challenge Hybern one-on-one, they could stand a chance. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't think it's a terrible idea. I just don't think Hybern would go for it.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
No, agreed.
So Feyre is sort of pissed by this, that he feels the need to, like, shoulder the burden alone. And she wants him to, like, work with everyone else so that he doesn't sacrifice himself. Mm-hmm. And so then her idea is to align with monsters as a surprise. Because, like, Hybern is going to know that they're going to try and unite all of Prythian. And he knows they're going to go out in search of allies. He wouldn't guess that they would ally themselves with, like, the creepy monsters that exist. Specifically, monsters like the Bone Carver. Mm-hmm. So, Rhys agrees to this plan. Like, yeah, okay, let's try and get the Bone Carver on our side. And then they have sex in the library. Like, peak goals here.
Yeah, this is exactly how I want to spend my days.
Mm-hmm. So, after that, Feyre goes to the House of Wind to see how Nesta's lesson is going with Amren, and to ask Amren about any of the prisoners she may have spoken to. Which I feel like is going to be a real fun conversation.
Yeah, I don't think this was the smartest move, but go on.
Anyway, that they're busy. Oh my god, words. They're busy practicing, like, shielding. I assume kind of like the mental shields. Mm-hmm. And both of them are very cranky. So she just doesn't ask anymore. She makes the decision not to ask.
Fair.
But they do make the decision that instead of Feyre and Rhys going to the prison, Feyre is going to go with Cassian because they don't want the Bone Carver to think they look desperate. If both rulers go, that's desperation right there. Yeah. But the High Lady going with, like, a commander, not so bad. That night, she dreamt of being back under the mountain, which she hadn't done in a while, with Amarantha, and in the dream, her sisters were being tortured, and Rhys was going willingly with Amarantha into a bedroom with his wings out, which is significant because he never let her see his wings.
Yeah.
And, like, she couldn't move. She couldn't do anything to save him. So she woke up in the middle of the night, and obviously Rhys comforted her. She did feel like throwing up, but kept it down. But she has this, like, resolve that she's never going to let anyone hurt Rhys or her sisters again, which is a big promise to make.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's accurate. You can't say that you're not going to let anyone get hurt ever again.
Yeah. No, that's not possible.
No. So the next morning, she's getting ready to leave, and Rhys asks if she needs to talk about it. And she just tells him all of it. She doesn't keep anything. This is what I like about them as a couple, is they are so, like, open with each other. Like, SJM doesn't create tension in their relationship to, like, make the story, like, more dramatic. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, like, her keeping secrets from him to protect him, and then, like, later on him getting mad at her for keeping secrets. Like, they're super open with each other, which I really appreciate. Because I don't want drama in a love story once they're already together.
Yeah, which kind of is what, like, when a couple gets together in the first book, I'm always like, do I want to keep reading this? Like, it's like TV shows do it all the time, where you're like, they finally put the couple together, and then obviously there needs to be something catastrophic, and you're like, please stop.
Yes. So I really like this. Anyway, so she tells him her nightmare, and she said she thinks that, there's a part of her that's been repairing since she got with Rhys. But because of everything that's happened recently, it's been ripped back open. So it's sort of rehashing old traumas. Rhys then drops Cassian and Feyre at the prison. Like, obviously he, like, makes her feel better first, and then he leaves again.
Yeah.
Cass takes her into the prison and sort of tells her that the Bone Carver is apparently rumored to be an old god from the time before High Fae. And apparently he can kill hundreds of soldiers with one breath. But the goal is sort of like, how do you control him and make him only kill the soldiers on the quote unquote the wrong side?
Yeah.
But do you know what? The Bone Carver doesn't seem that bad to me. Like, the same way the Suriel doesn't seem that bad.
Oh, Suriel.
Oh,
little baby.
Suriel. Little baby
so
that
much.
we love. But,
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Same.
Like, he doesn't actually, like, what has he done that's been bad? Besides the fact that he's in jail. But, like, what has he done that's been so awful lately? Like, the fact that he can destroy hundreds of people in one breath, like, sure, but has he? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't, not that we know of. No, he doesn't seem that bad. And he shows up like a little boy to Feyre. So,
yeah.
like, I don't think he seems bad to her either. I think we're just getting how she feels about him.
Yeah. Anyway, so they go speak to the Bone Carver, and he still looks like the little boy with dark hair and violet eyes. But Feyre finally understands, like, who this image is, because it's he's designed to look like someone you're close to or someone you love or something like that. And she realizes that it's her and Rhys's child that is not yet conceived. So she's like, if they live to have their child, this is what he will look like.
Yeah.
Which is adorable.
Yeah. I'm like, is the Bone Carver showing her what her child will actually look like, or is it showing her what her child could look like?
I feel like it's what he could look like. I guess we gotta wait until Rhys and Feyre potentially ever have a kid before we find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Bone Carver teases Cassian about Nesta. So, like, he knows things. And I want to know how he knows things.
I know.
But, so, he taunts Cassian about how she calls to him. And then he mentions something about how she entered the cauldron and took something. So, we're getting a little bit... But, like, did we know that already?
I don't think so. I don't think we knew that she took something.
Okay, so turns out Nesta took something. They give him, like, a small piece of adder bone. So the adder was that, like, really creepy creature that tormented her in ACOWAR. And last year in ACOWAR, Feyre, like, attacks him and helps, like, sees him tortured and really goes to town on him because he was a jackass. So she kills him. So they saved, I guess, a bit of his bones. And so the Bone Carver says, I can smell my sister on you.
Interesting.
Yes. And Feyre's like, what? Wait, what? But turns out the Bone Carver's sister is the Weaver.
Interesting.
Yes. So I guess he can smell her from her ring.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I was thinking, because it's been a really long time since
she has
been in the cottage, so I'm assuming it's just a whiff from the ring.
Yeah, and she's showered a few times since then.
She has.
Well, bathed,
yeah. So they tell the Bone Carver they may have a spell to send him back to his home world if he wants it. And he sort of says, like, guys, my home world is, like, destroyed. There's nothing for me to go back to, and this cell is exactly where I want to be. So, like, he likes being in prison.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he tells them that he showed up here with his twin sister, who is the Weaver, but her real name is, I don't know if it's Striga or Striga. I would say Striga or Striga. Striga.
See, they sound too similar, and now I can't remember. So I have listened to the book. No, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to say it's Striga. It's Stryga, so I'm going to say Striga.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm going to say Striga.
Say whatever you want.
Striga. So that's the Weaver's real name. And they also showed up with their older brother, Koche.
Kochi?
I
think so, but I don't know.
Okay. So they, like, spent a whole bunch of time unleashing hell in the world before a high fae trapped them and contained their power. He also tells them that they are essentially death gods, which is super fun.
Yes. So back to what I said earlier, she should have given the fucking ring back to the Weaver. She's a goddamn death god.
Yeah.
You send Feyre in there with no training and no, like, anything?
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So he essentially says, like, if a high fae is considered immortal, then the death gods are infinite. Like, to them, high fae are just, like, mortal, like, fleas. And the Bone Carver is in the jail on purpose to hide from his siblings because they are so much stronger than he is. And he doesn't want to leave because he doesn't want to remind his siblings that he exists. So he doesn't want to help them. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of like, yeah, good job. Like, you shouldn't have to do anything you don't want to do.
Yeah. Even if you are a prisoner.
Yeah. So they sort of are like, okay, well, I guess that's that. And they go to leave. And then they sort of let slip that they're going to the Hewn City. And that piques the Bone Carver's interest. So he makes a request. He said that there is a mirror in Keir's possession called the Ouroboros, which is just the funnest name ever, Ouroboros. So that's what the mirror was called. It used to belong to the Weaver Striga, and she used to admire herself in it, and it's an antique even to the Bone Carver. So, like, you gotta think that the Bone Carver is, like, millennium old.
Yeah. Which
means the mirror, which was ancient to somebody who's millennia old, like, how old is that mirror? Thousands of millennia old. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that is wild to think about. So he tells them that if they bring him the mirror, he will help.
It just breaks my brain. I'm like, could you even make mirrors back then?
I mean, they all have friggin' magic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I guess Feyre and Cassian leave. And they chat outside. And she asks, like, did you know that the Bone Carver was a death god? And he's like, well, you know, kind of. It was a calculated, like, deduction. Like, he didn't know for sure, but had a suspicion. And she sort of asks, like, if Nesta was death, would you be afraid of her? And he sort of admits he would be afraid for her, but he could never be afraid of her, which is just
never.
Why
is that? Why never?
So before they go to the Hewn City, Feyre wants to visit Elaine and Lucien, so she winnows and flies herself to the House of Wind. And I say flies in the loosest of terms because she flies really badly, and like essentially crashes on the porch. Yeah. So she visits with Elaine, and Elaine is, like, still devastated thinking about her wedding and, like, being like, oh, I'm supposed to get married soon. And she won't eat, and she's barely sleeping, and she's essentially speaking in riddles all the time. And Feyre and Nesta both are wondering, like, is this her power manifesting? Is it driving her insane? Mm-hmm. But they can't really tell.
Yeah.
So Feyre asks Nesta why she won't train with Cassian, like, physically. But Nesta sort of admits that, like, she doesn't want to train. She doesn't want to be a warrior. And I think this is very, like, indicative of... You know how, like, everybody is all about feminism? Mm-hmm. And feminism has turned into this whole, like, what it was supposed to be was equal rights and choice for women, right? Like, we get to choose what we do, choose who we are, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. But I feel like some people have twisted that into, like, you know, if you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home wife and you let your husband go out and you do all the cooking and cleaning, like, that's the wrong choice because that's not feminism.
Yeah.
Because you're doing, like, the role that man wants you to do. But, like, that's just sometimes something people enjoy.
Yeah, if you choose to do it, then it's different than if you're married to someone who...
forces it.
Yeah.
So, in my brain, I sort of connect it to this, like, Feyre's like, it wasn't okay for us to do that as humans. Now it is okay. It is encouraged for us to train and fight and be strong. But Nesta just doesn't want to.
Which should be fine.
Yes.
But it's not. Like, nobody's asking Elaine if she wants to go train.
No.
And it would actually probably help her mental health a lot if she did some exercise.
Yeah. So, like, it seems like Nesta's choice not to train, like, she doesn't want to train. She doesn't want to be a warrior. Like, it just seems like that choice is being glossed over. Like, Feyre thinks she should.
Yeah. I think the issue, though, that we don't really have in our common world is that they're literally going into a war. So you kind of don't really have a choice. You kind of need to be able to fight.
Yes, which is sort of the only caveat on there.
But I like, why aren't we badgering Elaine and asking her to train? Why just Nesta?
Yeah.
Because she's showing her trauma in a different outlet. We're gonna, like, ask her to train and not the... Like, I don't even know if they ever ask Elaine to train, like, in future books.
No.
But
not
it's a common
so
thing. Yeah. Weird.
Yeah. Anyway, all of a sudden Lucien shows up in the library and he's, like, amazed Elaine left her room, and he didn't know she was out of her room because he's been warned he has to stay away from her, but he just came for a book. He didn't think she would be there. Mm-hmm. Feyre Feyre slips into his mind to make sure that he's not going towards her to, like, try and get her away. Like, Elaine, I mean. And she hears his thoughts. And they're like, oh, she's the most beautiful creature I've ever seen, but she's too pale, she's too thin, mate, another man's bride, blah, 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 like, everything that you expect. Mm-hmm. And Elaine is still, like, dazed and in this, like, weird... I don't even know how to describe it. But, like, she asks him who he is. And then she makes the connection that he betrayed them in Highburn. But, like, she's like a vacant shell. Like, she's not even there.
Yeah.
So Feyre comes out of Lucien's mind and panics because him and Elaine had an interaction and, like, essentially announced that everybody is moving to the townhouse.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous to me.
Why?
Like, why is one interaction with Elaine cause for them to panic and want to keep a closer eye on her? Like, it was one accidental.
Yeah. I don't really see it like that. I kind of am like, they should never have put them in this house to begin with because they can't get outside. Like, they're not walking thousands of steps to get outside. I think like, I kind of feel like this is a callback to Amryn being like, they need to get out of the house. I didn't really think it was just a reaction to this. I thought it was more so like they need to be able to go outside because this is ridiculous.
I guess. Anyway. So yeah, I don't think anything really happened for them, for it to warrant, like, them being, like, afraid of Lucien and Elaine being around each other.
No, definitely not.
Anyway.
Like, if anything, he shows that he's, like, respectful and not just gonna grab her and leave.
Yeah. So they fly back to the townhouse. Rhys took Nesta, which was funny. And he flew her around and, like, made her sick. So when they get back to the house, she's really pissed at him. And her eyes flash like molten silver. And, like, that's her power. And she keeps a really tight leash on it. And they sort of ask, like, what is it? And she said that the cauldron took something from her. So she made it give something back. So Feyre thinks that it's death made flesh.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's why the cauldron isn't actually at full power, because Nesta took something from it.
Yeah.
So later on, her and Rhys are chatting about mates and the mate bond. And Feyre sort of asks, like, she tells Rhys she thinks that Elaine and Asriel would make a better pair. And asks, like, is there no free will for mates? Like, is there no choice? And Rhys sort of explains to her that, like, Elaine can reject the bond, but both of them will feel a tug for the rest of their existences.
Mm-hmm.
And in some continents and territories, mated females belong to their males. Yeah. But he says Elaine will always have the choice. So, like, it does seem that it's very much a male thing to feel the mate bond more so than a female thing.
Yeah, which is interesting.
But, like, I wonder if, like, so, like, if a dude really wanted to, could he just go up to a random girl and say, hey, you're my mate, and then, like, force her into marriage because they're mates? Even if they're not?
I don't think so. Because even if, like, the female doesn't have as much of a, like, there's clearly something because of a relationship that happens in another book. Like, there's both-sided.
Yeah. Anyway, so they get ready and they go to the Court of Nightmares. And they get there and Rhys lets Feyre sit on his throne and he sits on the arm. And they're sort of, like, pissed. They're like, I'll take the fact that you only have one throne here as a oversight and a mistake, and hopefully it'll be rectified the next time we show up. And all of a sudden, like, all of these tendrils of power come at her to sort of test her and see, like, if she's up to the snuff of being a high lady. And she lets all these people come, like, just close enough. And then she pounces on them, on the magic, like the tendrils, and digs her mind talons into them and, like, scrapes down the magic. And whatever it did, it injured several people. And when she finally lets go, like, a couple of people collapse, but, like, everybody is then sort of scared of her then. And that was the goal all along.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I love that she's badass.
Yeah, me too. And, like, she's still wearing, like, the wispy nothing, too. Like, she is still, like, half naked, but she's still so powerful, like, which I just really love. Mm-hmm. So they quickly go elsewhere. They meet Keir in the council room. They're going to ask him for his army. And Amren and Nesta, who are also there, go to the private store of magical items to practice Nesta's magic. And Keir knows that they're there to ask him for his army. And he sort of is taunting them and is like, you know, I'm a little bit sympathetic to the people of Highburn because my people also feel trapped. And, like, Rhys knows that that's bullshit, but at the same time, he sort of has to see what he wants. But, you know, there are threats thrown back and forth, and Rhys sort of deduces that Keir already knows what he's going to ask for, so just asks for it. So he's like, he sort of asks Rhys, he's like, would you whore out your mate the way you whored out yourself to Amarantha? And Rhys sort of then, again, is threatening and essentially tells him, like, I will end your life whenever I see fit. Like, don't forget that. He knew that Keir wouldn't want to fight, like, would be a bit hesitant. So he brought someone else to the meeting. Turns out it is Eris, the oldest son of the Autumn Court Lord, the one who chased Feyre through the Winter Court and almost kidnapped her.
Yeah.
Also, the one that was supposed to marry Mor, but she lost her virginity to Cassian instead, which caused Eris to not want her anymore. So he had her beaten and staked a note to her stomach and dropped her off at the night court, essentially saying she's all yours or something like that, which was bad. So it's why Mor hates him as much as she does.
Yeah, of course. And, like, I'm surprised that she doesn't hate Lucien, even though, like, he wasn't a part of it, but, like, still his court.
Yeah. So Mor is obviously, like, heartbroken that he invited Eris. And also for, like, just the fact that he surprised everyone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, why couldn't you tell them that? And I agree. Like, why couldn't he tell them that he was coming? I feel like he owed them that.
Yeah.
So apparently Keir has wanted a formal alliance with the Autumn Court for ages and ages. Half the reason why he tried to marry Mor into the family. So Rhys is giving him that alliance, but according to Keir, it's not enough.
Yeah, of course.
He also says that he wants access to Velaris. And Mor vocalizes that this is a terrible idea. She doesn't want to do this. She is dead set against it. Like, she says, like, they don't want the taint of the Hewn City in Velaris. And that it would, like, it would turn the place from what it is and what they love about it into something else. So Rhys agrees and says, fine, you can come to Velaris, but there will be restrictions in place, like, and around what time you're allowed to come, and the number of people you're allowed to come with. But, like, let's decide on all that later, which I also think is pretty sneaky, because, like, you could say, yes, I agree to you coming to Velaris for 2 hours on the 29th of February every... right? Like...
Yeah.
They could make the restrictions ridiculous.
And I think that's kind of what his plan is. But, like, he clearly knew that this was what Keir was going to ask for. So you're like, why didn't you tell people that you have a plan in place? Why are you, like, even for the integrity of, like, this meeting, you'd think he would have told them so that they didn't just blurt out no and what are you doing and, like, undermine him, basically.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So... Keir, like, you can tell that he knows that his daughter loves the city. And the fact that she is so against it automatically means that he just wins. Yeah. And, like, they can all tell that, like, he doesn't really care about going to Velaris. He just wants to take something his daughter loves. So, but however, Rhys agrees. And Feyre asks him then about the Ouroboros mirror. And Keir essentially just tells her, like, if you can take it, you can have it. Yeah. But apparently the mirror itself, it said that anyone who looks in the mirror goes crazy. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword. Like, they could take it to the Bone Carver, but then the risk is whoever grabs it will go crazy.
Yeah, which is not ideal right before war.
Yeah. So Keir then leaves, and Eris stays behind for a hot minute. So Rhys explains how the alliance came about. Rhys actually went and erased all of the Autumn Court princes, I guess, all of the brothers' memories of Feyre's powers to keep her safe from Baron. But they couldn't erase Eris's, since he was shielding himself.
Yeah.
So, like, he says, I know all about Damati, so I know how to, keep myself safe. Oh, what too bad I didn't teach my brothers. But he also said, like, he's not going to rat any of them out, because Feyre could be the key to saving everybody. So, like, already we've got Eris is sort of a bit more than we think he is. And he is actually, his story is probably one of the most exciting, one of the ones that I'm most excited for.
Same. He even says that there's so much that they don't know. And I'm like, I want to know it now. Why don't you just tell us? Why are you leaving me hanging? And we get a lot more of him in later book too. So, but yeah, I want to know everything.
Yeah, me too. So, like, Moore is still pissed at him and asks, like, the price. Like, why are you doing this for us? Like, do you want another bride to torture? So, like, obviously Moore's not over it.
Yeah, very personal.
And, yeah. Well, I mean, why wouldn't it be?
Of course it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why Rhys is an idiot. But...
Yeah. So, Eris admits that Moore doesn't know everything, and that there are other things at play. And when he hunted down Feyre and Lucien, he was given a direct order in front of his two brothers. So, like, he didn't really have an option to say no.
Yeah.
So then they sort of ask him, like, well, what about Lucien's girlfriend? Like, you didn't seem conflicted about that. And he actually admitted that he did not help with that at all. He refused that order because he says he wouldn't, like, just sit around and kill that girl.
Even though he was innocent.
Yeah, even though he was punished for it. And he sort of, like, has to be like, there's a lot you don't know about me, which is completely true.
Yeah.
Like, he's so much different he's so different, like, so much more than I expected.
Yeah. Can't wait to get more.
Anyway. So, Eris's asking price for joining them is that when the time comes, they are to support him for his bid to the Autumn Court throne, which I don't get at all. Well, so, like, one, we've talked about it in the past, that if Baron dies, his High Lord power gets transferred to somebody. That's not necessarily the oldest child. That could be anyone. So then that person becomes High Lord. So I don't understand how anybody in the Night Court could have a say and be like, oh, we support you. Like, isn't it the magic that decides regardless of anything else?
Yeah, but I guess if the magic picks someone else, then they would go help him kill that person. Is the only real, like, allies in a fight, I guess, is the only real thing I can think.
Yeah. So Eris wonders, like, why can't we just kill my dad? Like, why are you going to try and bargain with my dad? Or, like, why are you going to try and work with my dad? We should just kill him outright. And the title will pass to me. And then he'll pledge the Autumn Court troops. Yeah. Like, I'll do all that. But Rhys is sort of like, we don't want to get into that right away. Like, we don't want to work on killing leaders that don't do what we want them to. We don't want to do that right away.
That'll make it hard for the other courts to get on board.
Yeah. So Eris also says he sort of worries that, like, if his father learns that Feyre has some of his power, he'll fight with Hybern just on principle.
Yeah, which is what Lucien said too.
Yeah, which I find really stupid.
Same.
Like, it's a kernel of power. Like, he doesn't even notice it's missing. Why does it matter?
Also, just fight in the war on the right side with everyone else and kill her after, if that's really what, like, your issue is. It seems dumb.
Yeah. Anyway, so he then talks to Moore for a second, and he tells her that, like, he wouldn't have touched her, but he also understands why she slept with Cassian. Although he didn't say it like that. He said, I understand why you fucked the bastard. Yeah. So he sort of ended his betrothal in the only way he really knew how. And he said that there are a few things in life that he regrets, and how he treated Moore is one of them. But
which is interesting, which is why I want to know more.
But also then she just sort of says, like, I don't give a shit.
Which is fair. Like, he did... It wasn't great. Like, it doesn't matter if you regret it. Like, he's not even really apologizing. He's just saying he regrets it and that she doesn't understand everything. Like, I'm not saying he's a good person, but I am interested in hearing more of his story. But I do get why Moore hates him, and I don't think that's going to change.
But, like, you know what's bad? I almost would rather hear Eris' story over Lucien's story.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree.
Okay.
I'm like, especially in the next book. Like, you get so much more of him, and I'm just, like, super intrigued.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess that finishes up this week. Just more, like, saying, like, I don't give a shit, you're a piece of shit. And then Eris being like, see you at the meeting in a couple weeks, okay, bye. And that's it.
Yeah.
So, if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at coffeeandcoread.
So, next week, we're continuing with ACOWAR, and we're going to be discussing chapters 27 to 44. Make sure to follow along, and if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find our content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.